Today we are going to take a closer look at LocalStack. We'll figure out what it is and see how it can help us. Then we'll try it out with S3 and DynamoDB. And finally, we'll check out the LocalStack web platform, which makes it easy to use the services. LocalStack is an emulator for AWS Cloud Services, and it runs locally on your machine. It essentially functions as a sandbox environment for AWS. This allows you to simulate the behavior of multiple AWS services such as S3, DynamoDB, Lambda, SQS, and others. And we don't need an internet connection or an actual AWS account for that. Okay, now let's take a look at the services that are supported by LocalStack. So here's the list: account management, Amplify, API Gateway, Athena, Bedrock, CloudFront, CloudTrail, CodeCommit, Cognito, DynamoDB, Elastic Beanstalk, ECS, EKS. So the list is pretty extensive: Elastic Cache, Event Bridge, and some more. Okay, so what are some of the key benefits of using LocalStack? The first one would be that it accelerates development, so developers can iterate faster and deploy changes more quickly. It helps minimize AWS expenses, so unnecessary spending on AWS resources can be avoided by testing and developing locally. And it also simplifies development and reduces risk, so the potential for misconfiguration and security vulnerabilities is minimized. So the documentation of the LocalStack website is pretty extensive. Here you can see the details on how to install LocalStack, in particular how to install the LocalStack CLI. So you have the details for Linux, macOS, Windows, and also Python. So you can see all the different options right here. And it's also important to mention that LocalStack runs on Docker. So you need to have a Docker installed on your system. And here you have some additional details on how to run LocalStack in your environment. Okay, so I have a LocalStack instance running on my machine. So let's start testing the LocalStack CLI. We're going to do that by using a couple of services. We're going to start with S3. So we are going to start by creating a new bucket. And here it's important to mention that the CLI for AWS local is the same that using AWS, that is the CLI for Amazon Web Services. So the parameters are the same. So here we are running AWS local, S3 API, create bucket, and we pass the name of the bucket. And as you can see here, the bucket has been successfully created. Now we can list all the buckets that are created. And we can do that by running AWS local, S3 API, list buckets. And here we can see our bucket, the creation date, and some additional metadata that I think it's created or generated by LocalStack. Okay, now let's add a new file into this bucket. So for that, I'm going to use a file that I have locally here, this sample.txt file. So let's clean the screen and let's run AWS local to put that file into the bucket. So this will be AWS local, S3 API, put object, the name of the bucket, a key that will be the identifier of the file, in this case sample.txt, and the body that is the name of the file. Let's run this. So we basically get an e tag, a checksum. So the object has been inserted into the bucket. Now let's run an ls on the bucket to see all the objects. Basically, we're going to see the sample.txt file. So this is AWS local, S3 API, list objects. And we pass the bucket name that is sample bucket. We run this and we get the list, basically the contents that will be the file that we just uploaded into the bucket, and some other metadata generated by the LocalStack platform. Okay, so now let's work with DynamoDB. So for that, we're going to create a new DynamoDB table. and we need to run AWS local DynamoDB create table. We pass the table name. We pass the key schema. That is basically the definition of the partition key of the table. We are also going to pass the attribute definitions with the attribute name. That will be the ID. And the attribute type. That would be a number. We are also passing the billing mode. That will be pay per request or pay as you go. And we finally pass the region. That will be US East 1. So now let's run this command. And we get a successful response with the table description, the attribute definitions, the table name, the key schema, that is the partition key definition, table status, that is active, the creation date time, and some other additional metadata for the table. Okay, and now we can list all the all the DynamoDB tables that we created. So this would be AWS local, DynamoDB, list tables, and we also pass the region. That is the region where we created the table, that is US East 1. And we get the list of the tables, that is basically the table that we just created. Okay, so now let's insert a new item into this table. Basically, we run AWS local, DynamoDB, put item, the name of the table, and we pass the item that is going to have an ID of a numeric value that is 1, and the region that is US East 1. And now we can run a scan. Basically, it's like a query on Dynamo to get all the elements. So this is AWS local, DynamoDB scan. We pass the table name. That is wrong, actually. We need to put my table there. So I'm going to do that right now. So the table name will be my table. And we also pass the region, that is US1. And we run this command. And as we can see here, we get the list of the items. That will be one item with the ID 1. And finally, let's take a look at the LocalStack web app. Basically, you can find this at app.localstack.cloud. And basically, what we can do here is we can go to the resource browser. There are some services that are grayed out that we need to pay for a pro license for that. But we have some resources on S3, and we can access those. So let's do that. Let's go to the resource browser of S3. And as we can see here, we have the bucket that we created using the CLI. And we also have the file that we just created and we put into this bucket. And now let's take a look at the DynamoDB resources, basically the table. Let's refresh this page. And as we can see, we have my table, that is the table that we created. And we're going to see the elements, actually the items of this table. So it's basically this is the element with ID equals to 1. So that's pretty much it. And thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you guys in the next video.